He promised me he was faithful. He swore it, looked me in the eyes, and said I had nothing to worry about. But what I discovered shattered everything I thought I knew about trust. When I caught him red-handed, I couldn't believe my eyes. How could the person I trusted most betray me so cruelly? This is a story of lies, heartbreak, and the shocking truth that no one could have predicted. Stay tuned to find out what happened next, and make sure to subscribe to our channel for more jaw-dropping true infidelity stories like this one. Emily had always believed in the promise of love, the kind of love that was built on trust and mutual respect. Her relationship with Mark had been everything she wanted: solid, secure, and full of hope. They had met in their early 20s, and within months, they had moved in together. Mark was everything she had ever dreamed of: charming, attentive, and seemingly perfect. Their relationship flourished over the years, with Emily convinced that they had built something unbreakable. They had talked about marriage, children, and a future together, a future Emily thought was certain. But over the past few months, something had begun to feel off. It started with small things. Mark coming home later than usual, his phone buzzing incessantly, and the way he seemed distracted when they were together. Emily didn't want to admit it, but there were moments when she felt an unsettling distance between them. She brushed it off as work stress or the pressures of life. They both had demanding jobs, after all. But deep down, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Mark had always been very private about his phone, and for the first time in their relationship, Emily noticed how protective he was of it. He would leave it in another room when they ate dinner, or worse, make sure it was out of sight when she came into the room. At first, Emily chalked it up to him simply wanting his personal space, but with every passing day, the sense of unease grew stronger. She began to wonder why he felt the need to hide so much. What was going on behind the scenes? One evening, as Emily sat on the couch, her thoughts were consumed by her growing suspicions. She watched Mark as he texted someone across the room, his face tense, eyes focused. She had never been one to snoop, but tonight, something inside her urged her to look. Her heart pounded as she quietly walked over to the coffee table, where Mark's phone sat unattended. Without thinking, she picked it up, feeling the weight of the moment. She knew she shouldn't do this, but the temptation to uncover the truth was too powerful. Her hands trembled as she unlocked the phone, her fingers shaking as she scrolled through his messages. At first, there was nothing alarming, just messages about work, a few exchanges with friends, but as she scrolled further, one name stood out: Mia. Emily didn't recognize it at first, but as she read through the conversations, her stomach twisted. The messages between Mark and Mia weren't just casual, they were intimate. They joked about secret meetings, flirted with each other, and there was talk of seeing each other when Mark would be away on business. Each message felt like a punch to Emily's gut, each word unraveling the trust she had built with Mark. "I can't wait to see you again this weekend, baby. We'll make it special," one message read. Emily's heart stopped. The man she had trusted, the man who had promised her that she had nothing to worry about, was carrying on an affair with someone else. The realization hit her like a tidal wave, crashing over her and leaving her breathless. She stood there, paralyzed for what felt like an eternity, staring at the phone screen. Every moment she had spent with Mark, the laughter, the sweet memories, the love they had shared, suddenly felt like a lie. How had she missed the signs? How had she trusted him so completely, only to find out that he had been deceiving her for who knows how long? Tears welled up in her eyes as the weight of the betrayal hit her. She could feel her heart breaking in slow motion, the pain so intense she could hardly breathe. How could he do this to her? How could he betray their love so callously while looking her in the eyes every day and telling her everything was fine? Mark's laughter from the other room cut through the silence, and for a moment, Emily considered confronting him right then and there. But as she sat down on the couch, the reality of what she had just uncovered settled over her like a heavy blanket. She wasn't ready to face him. Not yet. She needed time to process everything. She had always been the trusting one, the one who believed in the goodness of others. But now she was questioning everything: her relationship, her choices, and most of all, her judgment. The man she had loved, the man she had given her heart to, had betrayed her in the most painful way possible. And now, as the tears fell silently down her face, Emily knew one thing for sure: everything was about to change. The following morning, Emily felt numb. She couldn't seem to focus on anything. Her mind was consumed by the messages she had read the night before. Every detail, every word between Mark and Mia replayed in her mind over and over again. The betrayal felt like a heavy weight on her chest, pressing down so hard that she could barely breathe. She had gone to bed in a haze of confusion, but now the truth was clearer than ever. Mark had been lying to her, and the lies had been hiding in plain sight. Emily wasn't sure what to do next. She had never imagined that the man she had loved so deeply could be capable of such dishonesty. It wasn't just the affair. It was the broken trust, the feeling of being blindsided by someone she had always relied on. She had thought their relationship was strong, built on honesty and communication. But now, it felt like everything had been built on a fragile foundation, one that had cracked without her even realizing it. As the day went on, Emily tried to act normal, trying to push the pain aside as best as she could. She went through the motions, making breakfast, getting ready for work, and pretending that everything was fine. But inside, she was falling apart. She couldn't stop thinking about the messages, about the words Mark had shared with Mia, about the life she thought she had. Mark came home later that afternoon, his usual carefree demeanor not giving any indication that Emily knew the truth. He kissed her on the cheek as he walked in, asking her about her day as if nothing was wrong. Emily forced a smile and gave him a half-hearted response, but inside, she was screaming. How could he stand there pretending everything was okay when she knew what he had done? As the evening wore on, Emily knew she had to confront him. The silence between them had become unbearable, and every minute felt like an eternity. She couldn't keep living a lie, pretending that their relationship was intact when the truth was sitting right in front of her. But how would she even start the conversation? How could she confront him without breaking down? Finally, after dinner, when Mark was settled on the couch watching TV, Emily took a deep breath. She knew she had to do this. She couldn't let him get away with the betrayal any longer. "Mark, we need to talk," Emily said, her voice calm but firm. Mark looked up, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. He turned off the TV and faced her, his expression changing from confusion to concern. "Of course, what's going on?" he asked, a slight edge of nervousness creeping into his voice. Emily didn't answer immediately. She stood there for a moment, gathering her thoughts, feeling the weight of everything she had to say. "I know about Mia," she said quietly, her eyes locking with his. The words hung in the air like a bombshell. Mark's face instantly went pale, his body stiffening as if he had been caught off guard. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. "I saw the messages," Emily continued, her voice steady but full of hurt. "I know what's been going on, Mark. I know you've been lying to me for months. How could you do this? How could you betray me like this?" Mark's face faltered, his eyes darting to the floor as guilt swept over him. "Emily, I'm so sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt you. It just happened, and I didn't know how to stop it. I should have been honest with you from the start, but I didn't want to lose you. I didn't know how to fix what I had broken." Emily felt her heart crack as she heard his words. He wasn't apologizing for the affair. He was apologizing for getting caught. He wasn't taking responsibility for the pain he had caused, the trust he had broken. His words sounded like excuses, like a man trying to save face, but the damage was already done. "You promised me, Mark," Emily said, her voice shaking with emotion. "You promised me you were faithful. You promised we would always be honest with each other. And now I find out that you've been lying to my face, that everything I thought we had was a lie." Mark looked up at her, tears welling in his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said again, his voice desperate. "Please, Emily, I'm begging you. Don't throw everything away. We can work through this. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Emily shook her head, the tears finally spilling down her cheeks. "No, Mark," she whispered. "You can't fix this. You've broken something that can't be fixed with words or promises. You've destroyed my trust, and that's something I can't just forget." The room was silent for a long moment as Emily wiped her tears away. She had no more words left, no more energy to keep fighting. She knew what needed to be done, and she had the courage to take that first step. "I think it's time for us to be apart," Emily said softly, her heart heavy but resolute. "I need to figure out who I am without you in my life. I can't keep living in this lie." Mark sat there, stunned, not knowing how to respond. He wanted to beg her to stay, to tell her that everything could be fixed. But Emily had already made her decision. The betrayal had cut too deep, and the pain was too much to overcome. With a final glance at Mark, Emily turned and walked away, her heart aching but filled with the strength to move on. The days following Emily's decision were filled with both relief and deep pain. The decision to move on from Mark was one of the hardest choices she had ever made, but it was also the clearest. The betrayal had taken away everything that had once felt solid in their relationship: trust, honesty, and security. She knew she couldn't continue living in a relationship where those things were gone. However, despite the clarity in her decision, Emily was struggling to adjust to her new reality. She moved out of the home she had shared with Mark, a house that once felt like a sanctuary but now felt suffocating with the memories of his lies. The physical space between them gave her a much-needed break, but the emotional weight was harder to shed. She found herself walking through empty rooms, feeling like a stranger in her own life, asking herself, "How did I get here?" Every day felt like a battle between her mind and her heart. Her mind told her she had done the right thing, that she was reclaiming her life and her peace, but her heart felt broken. The love she had once shared with Mark had been real, and walking away from him, even after everything, was still painful. She missed the little moments, the shared laughter, the quiet nights, and even the simple comfort of knowing he was there. Emily had no illusions about the kind of person Mark was now. The affair had shown her a side of him that she could no longer ignore, but that didn't make it easier to face the reality of ending their relationship. She spent sleepless nights thinking about their history, wondering what had gone wrong, asking herself if she should have seen the signs earlier. She also grappled with a deep sense of loss. The future they had talked about, growing old together, building a family, building a life, was now a shattered dream. But there was something deep inside her that kept telling her that it wasn't over. The loss of a relationship was heartbreaking, but it didn't define her. After several weeks of emotional turmoil, Emily decided to take control of her life. She realized that healing didn't come from staying in the pain. It came from confronting it and moving forward. It wasn't about getting closure from Mark. It was about finding her own closure, building her strength, and rediscovering who she was outside of the confines of a relationship. She began to focus on herself. She signed up for a fitness class she had been meaning to try, something that would allow her to release the pent-up frustration and grief she had been holding on to. The physical exertion felt cathartic, almost therapeutic. It gave her a sense of control and empowerment that she hadn't realized she needed. The more she focused on her body and mind, the more her heart began to heal. She wasn't just letting go of Mark. She was letting go of the pain and the self-doubt that had plagued her for so long. Emily also started re-engaging with her friends. She had isolated herself during her marriage, focusing on Mark and their life together, but now she found herself reaching out to people she hadn't seen in months. Her friends were a great source of support during this time, offering their shoulders to cry on and their ears to listen. They reminded her that she was worthy of love and happiness, that her identity wasn't tied to a relationship that had ended in betrayal. They encouraged her to find joy in the small things again, whether it was a night out with friends, reading a good book, or simply enjoying a cup of coffee in peace. One evening, after a long day, Emily sat on her balcony, watching the sunset. The weight of the last few months had been overwhelming, but now she could breathe a little easier. She had survived the storm, and while the scars of betrayal would remain, they would no longer define her. She had started to see the woman she was becoming, not the broken woman who had been betrayed, but a woman who had the strength to rebuild her life. She picked up her phone, scrolling through social media as she often did in her quiet moments. She came across an old picture of Mark, taken on one of their vacations, and for a split second, the memories flooded back. The love they had shared, the good times, and the hopes for the future. But as she stared at the photo, she didn't feel sadness anymore. She felt gratitude for what she had learned. She had loved deeply, but she had also learned that love couldn't be built on lies. Emily deleted the photo with a sense of finality. It was time to let go of the past and fully embrace the future. She wasn't erasing the memories of their time together, but she was choosing to let go of the emotional weight they carried. That night, as she lay in bed, her thoughts were different from how they had been just a few weeks ago. She wasn't consumed with questions about Mark or what went wrong. She was focused on herself, on her own healing and her own growth. The journey wasn't over, but she had taken the first steps toward rebuilding her life. She was no longer waiting for someone to fix her, to make her feel whole. She had discovered that the power to heal had always been within her. As the weeks passed, Emily began to find a new rhythm in her life. The emotional fog that had once clouded her every thought was slowly lifting, and for the first time in a long time, she felt like she could breathe again. She was no longer consumed by Mark's betrayal or the hurt that had kept her awake at night. It wasn't that she had forgotten what happened, but she was learning to move forward with the strength she had discovered within herself. She started focusing more on her career, taking on new projects at work that pushed her outside her comfort zone. She had always been dedicated to her job, but now it felt like an opportunity to prove to herself that she was capable of achieving great things on her own. Her confidence grew with every success, and she began to see herself not just as a woman who had been betrayed, but as a woman who was powerful, independent, and unstoppable. During this time, Emily also started to reconnect with her passions. She picked up painting again, something she had loved in her younger years but had put aside to focus on her relationship with Mark. The act of creating something beautiful gave her a sense of peace, a way to express her emotions that words couldn't capture. It was during one of her painting sessions that Emily realized something important. She wasn't just healing from the betrayal, she was rediscovering who she was. The woman she had lost in her marriage was coming back, stronger and more determined than ever. One afternoon, while at a local art gallery, Emily had an epiphany. She had been walking through the gallery, admiring the paintings, when she came across one that resonated deeply with her. It was a painting of a woman standing tall, surrounded by dark clouds, but with a bright light shining through. The image reminded Emily of her journey, the pain she had been through, but also the strength she had found in the darkness. It was a symbol of resilience, of finding hope even in the midst of hardship. She stood in front of the painting for several minutes, absorbing its meaning, before a smile crept across her face. It was in that moment that Emily fully understood the power of her own story. She had endured the unimaginable, but she had come out on the other side stronger than she had ever been. And the best part? She was doing it on her own. Later that evening, as she sat with her sister Jenna over dinner, Emily reflected on how far she had come. Jenna had been her rock throughout this journey, offering unwavering support and understanding when Emily needed it most. As they talked about the future, Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. She had once thought her life was over, that the betrayal had shattered her beyond repair. But now she saw a world of possibility ahead of her. She wasn't just healing, she was thriving. I never thought I could feel this strong again, Emily admitted, looking at her sister. I honestly thought I'd be stuck in that pain forever. But now I can see a future that's all mine. I'm not waiting for anyone else to fix me. Jenna smiled, reaching across the table to take her sister's hand. I've always known you had it in you, Em. You've always been stronger than you gave yourself credit for. Emily nodded, feeling a surge of pride. She had done the work, faced the pain, and allowed herself to heal. She had proven to herself that she didn't need anyone to define her worth. She was enough, just as she was. In the following weeks, Emily continued to build the life she had always dreamed of. She traveled more, visited new places, and embraced the freedom that had once felt so foreign. She wasn't running away from her past. She was simply creating a new chapter in her story. And while the memories of Mark and the pain of betrayal would always be a part of her, they no longer controlled her. She had taken back the power. One afternoon, while taking a walk in the park, Emily realized that she had stopped thinking about Mark altogether. The anger and hurt that once consumed her thoughts had dissipated, replaced by a deep sense of peace. She had forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because she needed to let go of the emotional baggage he had left behind. She wasn't carrying that weight anymore. As she walked through the park, the sun shining down on her, Emily felt free, truly free. She had reclaimed her life, her happiness, and her future. And while she didn't know what would come next, she knew she was ready for it. She was no longer waiting for someone else to make her happy. She was making herself happy. The journey wasn't over, but Emily was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. She had faced the darkness, and now she was walking toward the light. As the months passed, Emily's life continued to transform in ways she hadn't imagined. The emotional scars from Mark's betrayal would always remain, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they served as reminders of the strength and resilience she had discovered within herself. Each day, she grew more confident, more sure of who she was and what she deserved. She no longer feared being alone because she had finally realized that she was more than enough on her own. One evening, as Emily was sitting on her balcony, sipping a cup of tea and watching the sunset, she couldn't help but reflect on everything she had been through. She had come so far, and yet it felt like just the beginning of a new chapter. The past was no longer something that haunted her. She had made peace with it. The betrayal, the heartache, the doubts, it was all part of the journey that had led her to this moment. Emily had always dreamed of traveling the world, of experiencing new cultures, meeting new people, and immersing herself in adventures. But she had put those dreams aside for so many years, thinking that they weren't as important as building a life with someone else. Now, as the world seemed more open than ever before, she made a promise to herself to start living for herself. She booked her first solo trip to Europe, something she had always wanted to do but had never had the courage to pursue on her own. The day she left for her trip, she felt a sense of excitement and anticipation that she hadn't felt in years. She was finally stepping into the life she had always dreamed of, a life where she could make decisions for herself based on what she wanted, not what others expected of her. As she explored the streets of Paris, wandered through the museums in Rome, and sipped coffee in small cafes, Emily found a renewed sense of joy and purpose. She was rediscovering her love for life, her curiosity, and her freedom. But even as she enjoyed her travels, there were still moments when the pain from the past crept back in. She would occasionally think of Mark, of the love they once shared, and the promises they made to each other. There were times when she wondered what went wrong, what had caused him to betray her trust. But those moments were fewer and fewer as she began to focus on the present, on the woman she had become. One day, while sitting in a cafe in Florence, Emily received a message from a friend. It was an update on Mark. He had apparently moved on and was in a new relationship. The news hit her like a wave, but this time there was no pain, no jealousy, no anger, just a calm acceptance. She had let go of the past, and she no longer needed Mark to validate her worth. His new relationship didn't affect her because she had already found happiness within herself. As Emily continued her journey, she began to embrace the idea of love, not as something that depended on someone else, but as something that started with self-love. She had spent years thinking that love was about giving yourself fully to another person, but now she understood that true love begins with accepting yourself, flaws and all. She no longer needed someone to complete her. She was already complete. Months later, when Emily returned from her travels, she was a different woman. The journey had been transformative. She had seen the world, explored new opportunities, and most importantly, she had learned to embrace herself. She returned home with a new sense of confidence, ready to continue building the life she wanted, not the life she thought she should have. She focused on her career, her passions, and her relationships with friends and family. She didn't rush into a new relationship because she knew that the most important relationship was the one she had with herself. One day, as she walked through the park near her apartment, Emily smiled to herself. The future no longer seemed uncertain or scary. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she was ready for whatever came next. She had learned the hard way that life isn't about waiting for someone else to make you happy. It's about finding happiness within yourself, first and foremost. As Emily looked around, she realized how far she had come. The pain of betrayal had been immense, but it had led her to a place of strength and peace. She wasn't defined by what had happened to her. She was defined by how she had chosen to rise above it. She was no longer waiting for someone else to complete her. She was whole on her own. Have you ever experienced betrayal? How did you find the strength to move forward? Share your story in the comments below and inspire others who may be going through a similar journey. Don't forget to like and share this video, and subscribe to the channel for more empowering and inspiring stories. You're stronger than you think, and together we can rise above the challenges.